Greetings historians, welcome to Lore of the Dragon. So, while talking to other lore fanatics about the stories and adventures within the world of the Legend of Spyro, there was something shared that honestly I didn't know and now I'm extremely interested in. Now, before we start, everything in this talk is from the headcanon of a developer from the Legend of Spyro team, which doesn't make it canon, but it's interesting nonetheless, and honestly in some ways it's the closest that we will get to official canon. Now, for those who are curious, this extended version of the tale comes from a conversation that has to do with the elemental wheel, something that contains and shows the abilities currently accessible by any one dragon, of which was something used within A New Beginning. Jared Pullen, in response to another named Firestorm Dragon, was discussing how they would create one for the time element, as its properties are rather different than the other elements. Now, to explain what I'm going to be talking about here, for those who don't know what Dragon Time is or what time is in the context of what this video is about, Dragon Time is an ability that's within the Eternal Night, and you can use it to slow down time, and it's granted by someone named the Chronicler. Now that we have that out of the way, let's get into the quote. Time was an odd one in the sense that not only did it have no established icon assigned, but it behaved unlike any of the primary breath weapons, having rather a singular use, granted a highly effective and entertaining one. Time is not expressed like any elemental breath weapon. It's not exhaled nor varied by primary and secondary uses, but rather it's projected, much like a Fury expression. To include this on the elemental power-up device or some kind of greater circular disc that shows all the classes of dragon abilities would be epic and amazing to do, like an ability class family tree, but in circular form in keeping with the dragon stylings. I imagine leveling this ability class up using Spirit Gem energy would be limited to increasing but two factors: the duration of how long time can be slowed, and the rate of speed to which time can be slowed. But who knows? Perhaps the stronger a dragon is in this ability, the better they can manipulate the threads of time, perhaps even space-time, slowing time, going back, even going forward. Possibilities abound. If I had to represent time as an icon, I believe something akin to a stylized hourglass might work, drawing inspiration from the Chronicler. I also thought about what we might call this element itself. If not time, then Chronos perhaps. Or perhaps that's overthinking it. After this, another user named Jahudi joined the conversation and discussed how they would create this elemental wheel for time, which honestly I think you should read for yourself, because this conversation is just really filled with great ideas. But to get onto the topic at hand, we're going to look at Jared Pullen's response to this quote. One of these days I will have to share with you all the story of Pira Ignitus battle squire, who was lost in the war and transported to a bizarre island chain, where exposure to forces beyond the terrestrial plane granted him a unique ability set. Suffice it to say that those abilities pertain somewhat to space-time, but more so to the breaking of the laws of nature and cheating death itself. Okay, so this is a bit more of a wow comment than I've seen more than recently. For those who want to hear the whole story of Pyra, excluding what I'm about to talk about, I've talked about it before and I'll make a way to go see that. But to spoil the end of the story in that talk, we leave Pyra off as he lands on a distant isle, or apparently according to this, a chain of isles. The quote here in this talk is actually more recent, so we'll go with the idea that he wound up on a chain of isles rather than an isolated one. At the time, I didn't know this existed, and this is just something that's throwing a curveball at me, I'm going to be honest. So let's see if we can figure out what this all means without losing our minds, and then figure out what might have happened to Pyra. First off, let's figure out what this can mean by terrestrial plane. So the word of terrestrial, and its definition is of or relating to the earth or its inhabitants. In this case, the Earth would be whatever world the adventures of the Legend of Spyro take place on. From it saying that it takes place beyond that, we can pull a few ideas. So, what are the known extraterrestrial planes that are in the Legend of Spyro timeline? Well, we have three main ones that are considered most of the time. The Dragon Realms, or the main world, Convexity, an airlock dimension between the Dragon Realms, and the third plane of existence, which is quoted to be the Dark Realms beyond. With the language used saying that these planes of existence are beyond, both in the case of the Dark Realms and this other plane that was mentioned by Jared Pullen, it seems that it could fall into the same category of these dimensions per se. Travel is possible between them, as we can see with the Dragon Realms to Convexity. However, that requires a gateway. In this case, it seems that he was brought there, or drifted there as he was lost at sea. The word transported could also imply that he was brought there willingly, but we don't have anything else to say that he was, while in the main story of Pyra, he seemingly drifted his way to this island that we hear about, as it's stated he washed up somewhere on a distant, and now, with this information, chain of isles. But there is one more that we could consider. However, it is a bit different than the other planes of existence that we know of. During the Eternal Night, Spyro travels to a place known as the White Isle, home of the Chronicler. From here, the Chronicler watches over an age, recording them, and from what we know of these various chroniclers whom watch over their age, have recorded most of dragon history. We don't entirely know, but this could be another plane of existence, however closer than the others are in proximity to the Dragon Realms, as it bears a similar look to that of the Dragon Realms, but seems that it could never be found, except by those who are allowed in or are brought to the White Isle. But there is something else that bears similarity to Pyra's story. The Chronicler gives the power of dragon time, the ability to slow down time on command, to the purple dragon Spyro during the days before the Eternal Night. He is innately powerful and knowledgeable in the ways of time, as well as seemingly space, as he knows and sees most if not all actions taken. In past, present, or even rare cases, future. The extent of these powers we do not know, but perhaps they could be powers described in the quote talking about dragon time, being much more powerful than what we saw. Perhaps to some degree they could fall in line with space-time manipulation, something that does line up with what we see within the story. In turn, this place that he resides in could be filled with this type of magic, and perhaps that extends to the whole terrestrial plane of what the White Isles are in. In turn, this place that he resides in could be filled with this type of magic, and perhaps that extends to the whole terrestrial plane of what the White Isles are in. So somewhere, there is a chain of islands that lie beyond the terrestrial plane, and they have strange space-time attributes to them. This honestly opens a can of worms, figuring out how space-time works within the Legend of Spyro, which, well, is going to take some speculation to figure out. What we do know about time in the Legend of Spyro is that it can be controlled and harnessed, and seemingly, if a user is capable, they could theoretically see and travel through time. What this, I guess, implies that there are certain areas within the world of the Legend of Spyro that could be weak spots within the fabric of reality. These weak spots could be pockets of space-time, different from the areas around it. And in this case, this chain of islands would be one of them. Within, the strange properties of the island would start to affect Pyra's abilities, and give him ways of, as it says, abilities somewhat that have to do with space-time, but more so, breaking the laws of nature and cheating death itself. Now, the cheating death part is something else that's rather interesting, because there's only ever been 3 individuals who have ever done this, excluding Pyra. Ignitus, the Fire Guardian, technically Malefor, the Dark Master, and the Chronicler himself. The last one in particular is of special interest, because it also is how Ignitus was able to cheat death. You see, when a new age starts, a new Chronicler must be chosen to watch over that age. And that Chronicler, as far as we know, or at least in the case of Ignitus, was a dragon who passed on and whose spirit became the Chronicler once the previous passed on. In a way, this is cheating death, and could very well lead to the thought that Pyra cheated death and became the Chronicler of some age, perhaps the one that Spyro, if we really want to get trippy, and assume that he traveled back in time and became the Chronicler we meet in the Eternal Night. In this case, there might be some evidence to suggest that he is the Chronicler, but at the same time, we don't know for sure and we don't have solid evidence. Though, honestly, I don't know at this point. I think that if you want to run by that theory, I think you have a good cause to say that it might be true. But on the contrary, others might have a pretty good argument to say that it isn't. But there is the thought that it's not just the Chroniclers that are cheating death and piercing through time, but Pyra, perhaps far from the battlefields they thought he died upon. He is traveling through space and time, an undying observer of events. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this little nugget of a video. It's a bit longer than some of my videos, but you know what? It's a bit of an interesting subject. I think at some point I should just talk about Dragon Time, since it's really one of those things I haven't explored along with the other elements. So, you know what? Maybe at some point I'll get to that. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. And thank you to the people giving me red gems, Jabby, Benjamin Pratt, Shaggy, and Abyssal Blue. And then thank you for the people giving me the blue gems, Kiasu Shin and Eka Restored. And thank you for doing that over on Patreon. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. Again, I'll see you all the next time we talk about lore, speculation, or maybe a bit of headcanon. Stay safe, historians.